Star Wars Outlaws claims to be the first, but in the original Star Wars open world game, Knights of the Old Republic, you truly feel like a force of good or an overwhelmingly manipulative force of evil. My favorite example is when you get tasked by the Jedi Council to help the Matalis family find their missing son. The Matalis blame their rival family, the Sandrils, who in turn blame the Matalis for the death of their son years prior. You investigate and it turns out the Sandrils did in fact kidnap the son. However, it's more complex than that. The son is in love with the Sandrils' daughter and won't leave the complex without her, as he's worried that she'll face her father's wrath. So you have to convince her to leave with you as well. As you leave, there's a showdown between both fathers, you and the son and daughter. They both try to talk their fathers down, saying this rivalry has gone on far too long. This would be the perfect time to use your Jedi peacekeeping techniques to let everyone walk away alive and more enlightened. However, you could also tell them the only way this will end is with blood. After some back and forth, the kidnapper finally realizes that this feud has gone on far too long. They're fighting over children that can make their own decisions. It looks like they may reach some common ground and make up. We can't have that. I choose to lie and suggest that the Matalis did in fact kill the Sandrils' son years prior, saying this sets off a chain of events where they all kill each other. All the while I'm sitting in my chair rubbing my hands together maniacally saying, "Good. Good. Good." You earn some dark side points, experience, and finish up the mission. The Jedi Council is then suspicious of you moving forward, but have no evidence to directly blame you for the events. This is one example of the many ways you can approach situations in Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, a game released in 2003, when I was a wee lad of 15 years old. I loved the game then, and it was the catalyst for my love of Bioware games that remains to date. With the release of Star Wars Outlaws, I felt an overwhelming need to revisit the game and see how it holds up. Is it better than Star Wars Outlaws, or has it aged far too much to still be enjoyable? Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, not to be confused with the MMO, The Old Republic, is affectionately dubbed KOTOR and is a narrative-driven RPG adventure based thousands of years before the events of Phantom Menace. In KOTOR, you make a character, level up, travel to different planets, explore and complete missions in a purely single-player, roughly 30-hour adventure. It coined one of the first alignment systems in a video game, and we've seen it in almost every Bioware game since.
I've had enough of your disingenuous assertions.
Based on how you respond to dialogue, make choices, and so on, you can gain a light side or dark side alignment, which influences your powers and gear, as well as the ultimate ending of the game. The story is fantastic, and I still think about it 30 years later. If you haven't played the game yet, and still haven't had it spoiled for you, I want to experiment on your brain, but also please do yourself a favor and experience it for yourself. This is storytelling how it should be. So to save you from spoilers, that's the last I'll talk about: story. Does the game hold up? So for this playthrough, I made a dark side character, aka foregoing supporting the Republic in order to secretly support the Sith, mostly because of this woman.
Back off, Republic scum. A man like you couldn't hope to satisfy a Sith woman.
I like a challenge. The problem I had with the evil choices in this game weren't there because they were badly made or written. It was because sometimes evil really was pure evil. Far more than Mass Effect's renegade choices that are ruthless, KOTOR's dark side is truly psychopathic. It's morally hard to click those options at times. Here's an example. You find a Sith that wants help deciding how to deal with these so-called worthless students. Any normal, rational person would negotiate their safety. Oh no. You encourage him to fry them on the spot, amidst their pleading for help. The game doesn't pull any punches, and that's a central theme you'll notice throughout this video. You'll start the game by creating a character. You'll have no access to the Force at this stage. You'll earn that while progressing through the story. You'll level up, get stronger, and build relationships. You'll start with basic blasters and vibro swords and utilize a very Dungeons & Dragons style attribute and perk system, more on that soon. Similar to Dungeons & Dragons, you'll have skills like awareness that help you outside of combat. Demolitions, for example, lets you not only disable mines, which you can see with a high awareness skill, but pick them up and use them against your enemies. Skills, though not as fleshed out as a game like Baldur's Gate 3, help in many situations. A high computer skill will help you look through an area's cameras and sabotage terminals, blow up mines, reprogram droids, and more to get the advantage before having to physically walk through those areas. Combat in KOTOR is something you'll either love or hate. It's a turn-based Dungeons & Dragons style dice rolling in the background with a real-time action coat of paint. Lightsabers are clashing, blaster shots are being reflected, but under the hood, dice is being rolled to see if you hit, if you dodge, and so forth. If you love RPGs, you'll be right at home, though it has aged. This is more than a 20-year-old game after all, but 15-year-old me was in awe seeing and hearing the clashing of lightsabers and the pew of blaster fire. You can pause at any time and queue up actions between you and your two party members, who you can also freely control. Here we see me pausing before a fight and queuing up attacks from all my party members. Then I'm pausing to see it all play out. You also quickly realize the game is not easy. It was made in the era where they don't hold your hand because gratification didn't need to be quick. You'll want to use all the tools available to you in most fights, like stim packs, grenades, mines, adrenal boosts, and so forth. More so at the start of the game though. You see, what KOTOR nails is the ancient art of making you feel powerful. As the game progresses, they'll throw more and more enemies at you, rather than making them blaster sponges, but you'll grow more and more powerful, eventually feeling like an unstoppable force god, melting your enemies with a thought or cutting through them like Obi-Wan on the Burj Khalifa. This playthrough I focused on a dark side force power build. At the beginning, I didn't have the force to keep spamming abilities and I was weak in combat, but as I gained more dark side points, my dark side abilities got cheaper and my power grew, meaning I could spam powerful abilities that would do things like keeping groups force choked while I melted their faces off or drained their life force. Even early on, you can really live out your Vader fantasy, as it's not hard to force choke whole groups of enemies, humanoids or not, letting you further cackle like a maniacal psycho as your squad destroys the now helpless and defenseless fools. You'd think this wouldn't work on other Jedi or Dark Jedi, but you'd be wrong as well. It just works all too well. This may make it seem like my character was a little overpowered, but it's not the case. You'll feel powerful no matter what combat style you choose, even when you forego the Force and just start blasting. The game increases the difficulty by increasing the amount of enemies you face and reducing the amount of safe areas to heal up. You won't be able to heal whenever you want without items unless you have a Jedi on your squad that can heal, and during combat it's not so effective. So a good defense is good offense with a little preparation. I tried to choke everyone and deep fry them before they got close. This even works against enemies you think it wouldn't, like mini bosses.
Never too old for this!
That's right, Jolie, you're never too old for this. I actually feel that in my creaking bones. But like mentioned, though you do feel powerful, there are many fights wherein you are one bad play away from death. Knowing I'm about to face a harder fight, I can heal up and start using adrenal boosts to gain the edge. Don't also think that force wielders are the only inevitable endgame to your party composition. Here's an example of HK-47 holding his own solo while both my main character and other force wielder was passed out useless.
Blow that piece of junk out of the sky!
HK takes on a legion of Dark Jedi and Sith warriors and assassinates them with ruthless efficiency.
No, you're still holding on! Let go!
This is after all the KOTOR tier lists put HK-47 near the bottom. The game is balanced to make sure that all characters and builds are viable in some way, except if you focus on intelligence. You get enough skill points naturally, which is what intelligence focuses on. A high int character gets gimped in combat, but it's more of a role-playing statistic if anything, and if you want to roleplay as a guy who's bad in combat but great outside of it, intelligence would be for you. Intelligence is also for you if you want to experience true power. If you're stuck playing 20-year-old games but want to experience DLSS and ray tracing with brand new titles, you'll have to upgrade your hardware. I've been playing games such as Black Myth Wukong on my Project Zero build that hosts an MSI GeForce RTX 4090 and everything looks breathtaking. The Trifroza 3 thermal design enhances heat dissipation, providing exceptional thermal performance and ultra quiet acoustics. The fans even switch off when the GPU isn't working hard, which is handy when I'm recording. Also, with Nvidia's Lovelace architecture, I've been using AI enhanced video thanks to Nvidia Broadcast. For games where the frames really matter, DLSS can use advanced AI to essentially fill in the gaps, making everything buttery smooth. There isn't a game I don't push frames into the hundreds, even with features such as ray tracing on, so thanks to Nvidia and MSI for sponsoring this video, and if you want to get your hands on one, be sure to enter my competition, link below. Back to it, you can tell the devs really poured their heart into this game, from big choices that impact the outcome to the little things. If you pop on some Sith armor, NPCs will react to you differently. A cowering family in this apartment think you're gonna take them in for questioning, but are friendlier when you talk to them in your street clothes. A little further into the game, you encounter a fully grown Rancor in the tunnels. It has its back to you and hasn't spotted you yet. 15-year-old Dantix didn't notice the options I had and charged in, blasters blasting and vibro swords vibrating. It took me many reloads to fell it. What I didn't know is that you could stealth past the beast, or better yet, poison its food with grenades. What you do is stealth over to a pile of bones behind the beast and use the switch to give items feature. All throughout the game, you'll be prompted to take what you find in containers, or you can press a button to place stuff within them. I went through my first playthrough barely utilizing this feature. However, now older and with 1 or 2 less brain cells, I realized I could place bait within this pile along with some grenades. This triggers a cutscene wherein the Rancor eats the bait and gets a lethal tummy ache, letting you avoid the difficult fight completely but still gaining experience. Later on in the game, you'll come across missions like this, where you're tasked to solve a murder mystery, a whodunit, by using your brain meats and persuasion skill checks. You can fabulously fail this, accusing the wrong person, or succeed. There are many cases in the game where your high skill checks will be rewarded. There is even a moment where you can betray a quest giver for a bounty someone else has placed on his head. You do this by saying, "Chunder sends his regards," which honestly made me feel like I was playing a Star Wars version of Game of Thrones. The amount of potential betrayal in the game really leans into that theme. Most mainline missions will have multiple ways to complete them. For this one, you can strut through the front door swinging your dick, or the back door by hacking your way in, or interrogate a prisoner for another way in, meaning that each kind of build will have at least one way to complete the mission, considering your skill checks. You can also fail spectacularly. Here's me being caught for infiltrating a base illegally. As I'm evil, I gloat like a true Sith during the trial. However, this doesn't work out favorably as they simply execute me for admitting to the crime, even though I have evidence against those I infiltrated which would have given me a pardon for my actions. The instant game over reminds me of how Morinth in Mass Effect 2 insists you're strong enough to survive her space succubus sexy time with you, but you're just hit with a game over screen right after. So there are ramifications to your choices. It might be as small as a difference in conversation afterwards to something greater. For example, poisoning a resource to quickly pass a section of the game comes up later on while talking to a representative on another planet, which influences what items they have stocked. The little things that show the devs really cared about this game add up, down to even being able to name your save files, a quality of life feature I really enjoy and desperately miss in modern games. Speaking of modern games, a feature we haven't lost is gambling minigames involving cards. KOTOR has that in spades. You can travel around the galaxy building your perfect Pizark deck and can challenge masters on each planet. The recent Star Wars Outlaws takes this mechanic and expands upon it, except the card game is named Sabak. The game plays quite differently, but all this to say that KOTOR did it first and was probably the catalyst to devs putting in gambling minigames in Star Wars titles and even other RPGs like The Witcher. Pizark though is a game that is rigged against you from the start. You play sort of a blackjack against an opponent, though you always go first. meaning that you are at a disadvantage, a huge one from the start. It also feels as though the opponents cheat, always having the perfect card to get to 21. I admit this was the most frustrated I got within the game, and I easily spent an hour trying to beat this one filthy cheater within the Jedi Academy of all places. Between Pizark and the speeder races, Outlaws really should have been KOTOR 3. It's a crime they missed that opportunity. Speaking of crime, you can be evil for the sake of being evil, and of course earning those dark side points, which reduces the cost of dark side powers, as well as letting you equip dark side only items. You can be good as well, and the same applies, though evil genuinely feels evil in this game. In one instance, there was an alien trapped within a cell. He was only arrested because he helped remove a corpse from my apartment complex, a corpse I left there. In other words, he was there because he was helping me. You can flip the switches to free him, but he warns you that flipping them all to the wrong position begins the cell's execution protocol. So of course I do that, coldly murdering him to receive some experience and dark side points. There's also a side mission to become the champion of a combat arena, non-lethally taking out your competition in increasingly more difficult matches. At this stage, you don't have any force powers, so it's not as easy as you'd think if you haven't fully committed to a combat build. However, the most decorated champion of the arena, named Starkiller, has since retired, a Mandalorian that doesn't like the new non-lethal approach to the arena. He also has a bounty on his head from the Hutts, so what can you do? You can convince him to fight you after you become the new champion, but this fight will be to the death. Defeating him will claim his gear, the bounty, and some sweet dark side points to boot.
That is down! It's over! It's over! The fight is over! Bendex Starkiller is down!
Like mentioned at the start, you can manipulate a family into killing each other, which is just deliciously evil. You also have a lovable Wookiee on your squad, and not everyone can understand him. So naturally, if you have him out with you, any good Sith Lord would manipulate the situation, lying to people about what the Wookiee is saying in order to bully them to get what you want. This game has no problems locking you out of talking to some people if you're rude enough. Hell, you can empty a full building out or even a town by simply threatening everyone. I realized I didn't record the footage of this as I was enjoying playing the game so much that I jumped off the computer and kept playing it on my Steam Deck in bed, which my future wife wasn't so happy about. Speaking of preferences, you're going to have yours when it comes to what companions to bring with you. The story, after all, would be nothing without a fun cast of characters that join you on your adventures. The most popular character from the series is so evil it's hilarious at times, the assassin droid HK-47. I won't ruin his appeal here just in case you haven't played the game yet, but if you have high enough repair skill, you can attempt to improve his combat ability before he ultimately fully unlocks at a key point at the end of the story. A little chef's kiss touch to the game. One of my favorite characters as 15-year-old Dan was Joel Lee, a cranky old former Jedi voiced by the great Kevin Michael Richardson, who you might recognize from an absolute ton of animated cartoons and even games. He was Barbados Slim in Futurama, Principal Lewis in American Dad, and was in around 25 other Star Wars games and shows, though at the time I didn't realize that he was the reason I enjoyed the character so much. Even the side characters are voiced by people you'd recognize. Here is Nibbler's voice actor, Frank Welker, voicing a random old man in a cell.
The Sith must have been spying on me and Alasa, trying to make sure she wasn't a double agent.
There's a lot of voice actors here that would go on to voice characters in Mass Effect. Kaden Alenko is Karth, and we hear a ton of Ashley Williams and Dr. Chakwas. The voice acting in this game is outstanding. That would mean nothing though if the game wasn't well written. Well, even for such an old title, pushing the boundaries of what was possible given limited hardware space, they've managed to really optimize the script, giving you exactly what you need without making conversations feel rushed, empty, soulless, or worse. The characters have their own distinct personality and the script is very much tailored to them. I didn't once bat an eyelash.
Remember, we're talking about the Force here. At this point, Malik himself could drop out of the sky and I wouldn't bat an eyelash.
Really, besides the early 2000s lip syncing, the only other annoyance about companions is that they are solid and don't shift out of your way when you need to walk past them. The good news is you can simply switch to them and continue walking. You can also switch out companions as you see fit, as long as you're in an area that can do so and not in combat. It saves time not having to return to the ship, aka your hub. Yes, the game is not without its problems. Right at the start of the game, I ran into what was a constant annoyance all throughout the roughly 30 hours I spent on the playthrough. The character I use in combat will lock up after a combat encounter resolves. They won't be able to be moved manually unless I click something that they can reach in the distance, meaning that if I want to be able to control the character, I would need to switch to another party member or simply F5, F6, which would quick save then quick load. It only wasted a few seconds since the game loads faster than the Dragon Age fandom turns on each other. This bug is consistent, but thankfully the only real technical problem I had running the game. There are other non-technical annoyances that arise, but these are mostly because the game is showing its age. I mentioned pathing before, but if you queue up some attacks on an enemy that isn't standing still, your character will start the animation to attack, but then stop as the enemy has moved out of its range. You'll continue to stutter like this until you manually press the disengage button or the enemy starts moving towards you. Pathing is not great this way, and you'll notice it every time you need to wait for your companions to catch up to you so you can just move on to the next section of the map. Speaking of, there are a few rare instances where you have to walk painfully slow to the next section. While underwater or in space, this is further highlighted. At least on the ground, you can use the Force to speed yourself up, which I 100% recommend as a power. Here I am walking slowly in space using a similar environmental suit to the one we used underwater. I slowly waddled the gauntlet twice before I realized a door was locked and I needed to go all the way back to where I was to unlock it. That tickled my keyboard smashing hand a little bit. Also, with how great the choices are in conversation, you'd think I'm implying that the system is flawless. That's definitely not the case. Here we can threaten a guard by suggesting our Wookiee friend will rip off his arms. When the guard doesn't take the threat well, we can convince him that we were just kidding. He says, "You're not so bad," and forgets about it, letting you continue to talk to him. We can then proceed to threaten him again and claim to be kidding, rinse and repeat over and over forever if we want. This kind of thing is ironed out in later Bioware games and thankfully isn't a common occurrence in KOTOR. Most of the time, a threat will lock you out of talking to an NPC completely, as they will flee or don't wish to talk to you further after they've been extorted out of their credits or information. Once again, the game doesn't hold your hand, you will piss people off. You also may be wondering how a game of this scale could have such a tiny file size of around 3 GB. Yes, it's an older game, but that's smaller than the file size of this entire video by a lot. Well, one of the techniques is simple. They have about a third of the characters in the game speak an alien language wherein they repeat the same phrases over and over to subtitles no matter what they are saying. This works fine with the Wookiees, as they have a very bestial language that seems more context-based, like a Smurf or Squanchy from Rick and Morty.
Then I suppose we have little choice.
It becomes more noticeable with other languages like Huttese. There are also only a small handful of pre-rendered clips. Thankfully too, as they also haven't aged well and are a miss when trying to build atmosphere. Speaking of missing, if you ever try bashing open locked doors and crates, you can miss. I'm not sure how exactly, but even stationary objects are subject to rolls. So if you're not a fan of rolling dice, this will annoy you. But hey, if you've ever rolled to open something before in D&D and failed, you'll understand the feeling. At least here you'll eventually get it open. Sometimes data pads will be found on bodies or in containers. You can easily miss these and you'll need to go within a menu to find and read it. In one side mission, you have to hunt down some Mandalorians. I walked around for a while to no luck before I scanned my inventory for clues. In one of the data pads I didn't realize I had, it implied that the Mandalorians in this area are only attacking unarmed people. So I disarmed my squad and walked around. I was then randomly attacked. It's a great idea, but something most people will miss. Overall, Knights of the Old Republic was a fantastic revisit. I continue to feel as though the later Star Wars games would benefit from studying it a bit more. For example, Star Wars Outlaws would have done so much better if K-Vest could have been customized so people could project themselves into the role, so they could play their outlaw fantasy. KOTOR lets you do that fabulously. It really leans into the power fantasy while staying true to what Star Wars represents. Even with all its flaws, I still love this game. So thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please do the typical YouTube stuff. Also, check out my competition. For everything RPG, you're in the right place. Ciao, friends.